Hashtag she slept in a cheap motel, while owning a hotel chain. The roach crawled across the ceiling above bed number 7 at the Starlight Motel, its legs tapping a Morse code message that only Clara Blackwood could decode. She had been watching it for 3 hours now, her eyes tracking its path while her mind calculated the quarterly profits from her 12 luxury hotels scattered across America like hidden jewels. The irony was not lost on her. Here she lay on sheets that smelled of industrial bleach and broken dreams while her guests 2 states away slept on Egyptian cotton worth more than most people made in a month. The neon sign outside her window buzzed and flickered, casting pink shadows across her weathered face. She was 42 but looked older, the kind of older that comes from carrying secrets heavier than gold. She reached for the burner phone on the nightstand, its screen cracked but functional. 3 missed calls from her assistant Marcus, 2 from her lawyer, 1 from a number she did not recognize but knew by heart. She did not call back. Instead, she pulled the worn notebook from beneath her pillow, its pages filled with numbers and names written in a code she had invented during her first year of hiding. Hotel Sierra in Denver had made $8 million last quarter. Hotel November in Miami was up 15%. Hotel Whiskey in Las Vegas was her crown jewel at $23 million in pure profit. Yet here she was, paying $37 a night for a room that probably housed more DNA evidence than a crime lab. The notebook contained more than financial records. It held the truth about why Clara Blackwood, once featured on the cover of Forbes as America's youngest self-made hotel heiress, now lived like a ghost in roadside motels across the Midwest. Her empire built not just on ambition and smart investments, but on a foundation of lies so deep and dark that even she sometimes forgot where the truth ended and the performance began. 23 years ago, Clara Novak worked as a night auditor at a Marriott in downtown Chicago, her hands stained with cheap coffee and her dreams bigger than the city skyline. She watched wealthy guests come and go, studied their mannerisms, memorized their complaints, learned their language of entitlement and expectation. She was nobody then, invisible, just another working-class girl with a high school diploma and a hunger that gnawed at her bones like cancer. The first lie was her name. Clara Novak died in a car accident on Interstate 55 during a snowstorm in February 1999, except she did not die, she simply ceased to exist. Her body was never found because there was no body to find. The accident report was filed by a man named Detective Ray Morrison, who owed Clara a favor that dated back to high school when she had covered for him during a cheating scandal that would have cost him his scholarship. Clara Blackwood was born 3 months later in Phoenix, Arizona, with a birth certificate purchased from a man who specialized in creating identities for people who needed to disappear. She had saved every penny from her job at the Marriott, lived on ramen noodles and determination, slept in her car between shifts, all to afford this transformation, this rebirth, this chance to become someone who mattered. The inheritance story was elegant in its simplicity. Her fictional grandmother Eleanor Blackwood had allegedly died and left her a modest trust fund of $200,000, enough to invest in her first property but small enough to avoid scrutiny. She purchased a failing bed and breakfast in Vermont, transformed it into a boutique hotel, sold it for triple the price within 2 years, then repeated the process across New England like a virus spreading through the hospitality industry. By 2010, she owned 6 hotels and had appeared in Business Week as a rising star in luxury hospitality. By 2015, she had expanded to 12 properties and was worth an estimated $47 million. She dated senators and CEOs, attended charity galas in Paris and board meetings in Manhattan, lived in a penthouse that cost more per month than most people made in a year. She was untouchable. Until she was not. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March 2018, while she was reviewing architectural plans for her 13th hotel in San Francisco. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, deadly. "We know who you really are, Clara Novak." The line went dead before she could respond, but the message was clear. Someone had found the thread, pulled it, unraveled 20 years of careful construction, discovered the truth that would destroy everything she had built, everyone she had become, every person who depended on her for their livelihood. She had 48 hours to decide: pay $10 million or watch her empire crumble on the front page of every major newspaper in America. The blackmailer was smart, professional, had done their homework. They knew about Detective Morrison, about the forged documents, about the fictional grandmother, about every lie she had told to build her fortune. Clara made her choice. She disappeared. Not into thin air, but into the shadows, into the margins, into the forgotten spaces between what people see and what actually exists. She transferred control of her hotels to a network of shell companies and trusts so complex that even she sometimes forgot which entity owned what. Her personal fortune was moved to offshore accounts in countries that asked no questions and remembered no names. Clara Blackwood ceased to exist on paper, but her hotels continued to thrive under the management of carefully selected proxies who believed they worked for a reclusive Swiss investment firm. The profits continued to flow, the empire continued to grow, but the Empress had vanished into the American night. The Starlight Motel was her base of operations now, room 7 rented month by month under the name Sarah Collins. The manager Jerry was a former convict who understood the value of not asking questions. He accepted cash payments and maintained no digital records, the perfect anonymity for someone who needed to remain dead while still pulling the strings of a $47 million empire. From this dingy room with its stained carpet and broken air conditioner, Clara continued to run her business empire through encrypted communications and coded messages. Her laptop was a military-grade machine that could destroy its own hard drive with a single command. Her internet connection was routed through 7 different countries and 3 different satellite networks. She monitored her hotels through security cameras she had secretly installed during renovations, watched her managers conduct meetings she should have been leading, observed guests enjoying luxury she had created but could no longer claim. It was like watching her own life from the grave, fascinating and heartbreaking in equal measure. The blackmailer had kept their word, no story appeared in the newspapers, no investigation was launched. Clara Blackwood simply faded from public view the way celebrities sometimes do. People assumed she had retired to a private island or married some European prince. The business world moved on without her, forgot her, replaced her with newer, shinier entrepreneurs. But she was still watching. Still controlling. Still building. The 13th hotel opened in San Francisco 6 months after her disappearance, followed by properties in Seattle, Portland, and Austin, each one more successful than the last. Her ghost hand guided every decision, approved every design, monitored every profit margin. She had become the invisible queen of American luxury hospitality. The notebook contained more than financial records. It held the stories of people who had crossed her path during these 4 years of exile. The truck driver who recognized her at a gas station in Nebraska and accepted $5,000 to forget he had ever seen her face. The journalist who came too close to the truth and found his investigation mysteriously reassigned to cover celebrity divorces instead. The private investigator hired by a competitor who suffered a convenient car accident. That left him with amnesia about his most recent cases. Clara had learned that disappearing was easy. Staying disappeared required constant vigilance. Every interaction was a potential exposure, every conversation a possible trap. She changed motels every few weeks, altered her appearance regularly, maintained a dozen different identities complete with credit cards and driver's licenses. The hardest part was not the isolation or the paranoia, it was the success. Her hotels were thriving without her public presence, proving that her greatest achievement was building a machine that could function without its creator. She was simultaneously proud and devastated, vindicated and obsolete. Tonight was different though. Tonight the notebook contained new information that made her hands shake as she wrote. Someone was buying up properties around her hotels, creating pressure, orchestrating a hostile takeover attempt that could only come from someone who knew the true ownership structure of her empire. The blackmailer was back. But this time they wanted more than money, they wanted everything. Her hotels, her fortune, her secrets, her life. The phone call had come 3 days ago, the same calm voice, the same professional tone, but the demand was different. We want it all, Clara, or everyone learns the truth about what really happened to Thomas Kellerman. Thomas Kellerman. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in over 20 years, had almost convinced herself it was a nightmare rather than a memory, but nightmares do not leave bodies buried in concrete foundations. Nightmares do not require alibis and witnesses and carefully crafted lies. Thomas Kellerman had been her first investor, back when Clara Novak was still real and Clara Blackwood was just a dream. He had believed in her vision, provided the initial capital for her first hotel purchase, became not just a business partner but something approaching a friend. He had also discovered her true identity 3 months into their partnership. The night he died, Thomas had called Clara to his office above the small hotel they were renovating together, said he wanted to discuss the future of their business relationship. When she arrived, he was sitting behind his desk with a folder full of documents, her real birth certificate, her employment records from the Marriott, photographs of her taken during her previous life. He was not angry, he was sad, disappointed, concerned about what kind of person could lie so completely about their identity. He wanted to help her, he said, wanted to find a legal way to resolve the situation, protect both their investments while giving her a chance to start over honestly. She listened to his kind words and rational suggestions while her hand found the bronze paperweight on his desk, the one shaped like a miniature hotel, heavy and sharp-edged, perfect for solving problems that could not be solved with words. The first blow cracked his skull, the second stopped his breathing, the third was just anger, frustration at having her carefully constructed new life threatened by someone who claimed to care about her. She spent the next 6 hours cleaning blood and searching for any copies of the documents he had gathered. Thomas Kellerman disappeared that night, his body sealed inside the concrete foundation of what would become the Hotel Sierra in Denver, her first major success, her crown jewel, his tomb. Every guest who slept in that hotel was resting above his bones, every profit she made was payment for his silence. The official story was simple. Thomas had taken an early buyout of his investment and moved to Europe to pursue other opportunities. Clara provided documentation of the transaction, letters explaining his decision, even a few postcards from fictional travels. The investigation was perfunctory. Thomas had no family, few friends, no one cared enough to dig deeper. But someone knew. Someone had been watching, collecting evidence, building a case, waiting 20 years for the perfect moment to strike, and that someone was now demanding not just money but everything she had built on Thomas Kellerman's grave. Clara closed the notebook and walked to the window. The motel parking lot was empty except for her rental car and a semi-truck whose driver was probably sleeping off a run from California. She pulled the curtains closed and began packing her few possessions into a single suitcase. Tomorrow she would check out of the Starlight Motel and drive south, toward Louisiana, toward a confrontation she had been avoiding for 20 years. The address in the blackmailer's message was burned into her memory, a warehouse in New Orleans that used to store cotton but now served as a meeting place for people who conducted business in the shadows. She knew the location because she had used it herself 3 years ago when a competitor got too curious about her ownership structures. This time she would not be the one making threats. The drive to New Orleans took 14 hours, through small towns and empty highways, past truck stops and roadside diners, through landscapes that looked like movie sets for films about forgotten America. Clara drove carefully, obeying every speed limit, stopping for gas and coffee, maintaining the appearance of just another traveler on just another journey. She thought about Thomas Kellerman during those long hours, remembered his laugh, his enthusiasm for the hotel business, his genuine kindness toward her when she was nobody, his patience with her questions and his generosity with his knowledge. He had been a good man who made the mistake of trusting someone who had already decided that goodness was a luxury she could not afford. The warehouse district in New Orleans looked exactly as she remembered, abandoned buildings and broken streetlights, the kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business and conversations happened in whispers. She parked 3 blocks away and walked through shadows that smelled of river water and industrial decay. The warehouse was larger than she expected, its windows painted black, its doors reinforced with steel. She checked her watch, 11:47, 13 minutes early, enough time to survey the surroundings and confirm what she already suspected. This was a trap. The blackmailer was not inside the warehouse, they were watching from somewhere else, observing her arrival, documenting her presence, collecting evidence for whatever endgame they had planned. She considered leaving, disappearing again, starting over in another state with another identity. Instead she walked to the front door and knocked. The man who answered was not what she expected, mid-60s, gray hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like a retired professor or a small-town librarian, definitely not the type who usually engaged in extortion and blackmail. "You are early," he said, his voice the same calm tone from the phone calls. "You are not what I expected," Clara replied. "Neither were you, 20 years ago." He led her through the warehouse, past stacks of old furniture and cardboard boxes, toward a small office in the back corner. The walls were covered with photographs, documents, newspaper clippings, a timeline of her life that was more complete than her own memories. "My name is David Kellerman," he said. "I am Thomas's younger brother." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. Thomas had never mentioned a brother, had claimed to be alone in the world, an only child whose parents died young. She studied David's face and saw the resemblance now, the same gentle features, the same intelligent eyes. "Thomas wrote me letters," David continued, "told me about his business partner, the brilliant young woman who was going to revolutionize the hotel industry. He was excited about your partnership, believed you were going to build something special together." The letters stopped arriving in March 1999. Clara said nothing, let him talk, watched his hands for weapons, his eyes for tells, calculated distances and exit routes while maintaining the appearance of calm attention. "I hired investigators," David said, but Thomas had vanished completely, no forwarding address, no contact information. The business partnership had been dissolved, the hotel sold to a company that did not exist 3 months earlier. It was as if my brother had never existed. The investigation went nowhere. The police were not interested in a missing person case involving an adult with no family responsibilities. I spent my own money, followed every lead, but Thomas had simply vanished into thin air. Until last year. David walked to his desk and picked up a manila folder, thick with documents and photographs. He opened it carefully, as if the contents were fragile, irreplaceable. "A construction worker found something during the demolition of your Denver hotel," he said. "Renovations required digging up the old foundation. They found bones, David, human bones, buried in concrete that was poured in 1999. The bones were identified through dental records as belonging to Thomas Kellerman." Clara's expression did not change. She had practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times, prepared for the possibility that Thomas's body would eventually be discovered. She was ready with explanations, alibis, alternative theories. "That must have been terrible for you," she said, "to learn what happened to your brother after all these years." David smiled, a sad expression that reminded her painfully of Thomas. "The interesting thing about the investigation," he continued, "is that it led to other discoveries. The company that bought the hotel from Thomas's partnership was owned by a shell company, which was owned by another shell company, which eventually traced back to Clara Blackwood, who did not exist before 1999. Clara Blackwood, who purchased her first property with money that allegedly came from a grandmother who never existed, who built a hotel empire on a foundation that included the bones of her first business partner. The police are very interested in speaking with you, Clara, but Clara Blackwood seems to have vanished as completely as Thomas did 20 years ago." He closed the folder and set it aside, leaned back in his chair, studied her face with the same careful attention Thomas used to show when reviewing business proposals. "I am not interested in justice," he said. "I am too old for revenge. The police will never find you, and even if they did, proving murder after 20 years would be nearly impossible. I want something else." Clara waited. "I want you to remember him," David said. "I want you to know that Thomas Kellerman was a good man who believed in people, who saw potential where others saw problems, who died because he tried to help someone who did not want to be helped. I want you to carry that weight for the rest of your life. And I want you to do something good with the fortune you built on his bones." He reached into another drawer and pulled out a legal document, several pages thick, professionally prepared. "This is a contract," he said. "It transfers ownership of all your hotels to a foundation that will use the profits to fund scholarships for young entrepreneurs, people like Thomas was, people like you pretended to be. You sign this, and I disappear. The police investigation stalls, the evidence gets lost, Clara Blackwood becomes a cold case that no one remembers. You refuse, and tomorrow morning every major newspaper in America runs the story of the hotel heiress who murdered her business partner and built an empire on his grave." Clara read the contract carefully. It was thorough, professional, completely legal. It would strip her of everything she had built while ensuring that Thomas's death finally served some constructive purpose. She looked up at David, saw Thomas's face and his features, remembered the night she killed his brother, the sound of the paperweight connecting with skull, the weight of his body as she dragged it to the construction site. "What about me?" she asked. "What about you?" Where do I go? What do I do? How do I live? David shrugged, the gesture so similar to one she remembered from Thomas that it made her chest tight. Figure it out, he said, you are good at becoming someone new, you have had practice. Clara signed the contract. 3 months later, she was working as a night auditor at a Holiday Inn in Tucson, Arizona, her hands stained with cheap coffee, her dreams smaller than the desert horizon. She had chosen the name Maria Santos, complete with forged documents and a fictional background. She lived in a studio apartment that cost $400 a month and drove a Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on the odometer. Her 12 luxury hotels were now operated by the Thomas Kellerman Foundation for Entrepreneurial Excellence, their profits funding scholarships and business incubators across America. Her former empire continued to grow and thrive, but now it served a purpose beyond her own enrichment. She thought about Thomas often during those long night shifts, remembered conversations they had shared about the future of hospitality, about creating spaces where people felt welcomed and valued, about the responsibility that came with success. He would have been proud of what his foundation was accomplishing, she thought, proud that his death had eventually led to something meaningful. The irony was not lost on her. She was back where she started, a nobody working overnight at a chain hotel, watching wealthy guests come and go, invisible and forgotten, but this time the circle felt complete rather than broken. This time she understood the difference between building something and creating something worthwhile. Sometimes, during quiet hours when the hotel was empty and the night stretched endlessly ahead, she would pull out a worn notebook and write, not financial records or business plans, but letters to Thomas Kellerman, apologies she would never send, explanations for choices she could never justify, promises to do better that she was finally keeping. Maria Santos was nobody special, just another working-class woman with a high school diploma and a past she preferred not to discuss, but she was honest in ways that Clara Blackwood never was, and she slept peacefully in ways that Clara Novak never could. The hotel heiress who once slept in luxury suites worth thousands per night now rested on a mattress that cost $99 at a discount store, but her dreams were untroubled by ghosts, and her hands were finally clean. She had learned, 24 years too late, that some fortunes cost more than they are worth, and some prices cannot be paid with money, that the true measure of success is not what you build, but what you leave behind, and whether the world is better or worse for your having existed in it. Thomas Kellerman's foundation would outlive them both, she knew, would continue creating opportunities for young entrepreneurs long after everyone had forgotten the name Clara Blackwood, and perhaps that was the only justice that mattered, the only redemption that was possible. She slept in a cheap motel for 4 years while owning a hotel chain, but now she slept in a cheap apartment while owning nothing at all, and discovered that the second kind of poverty was infinitely richer than the first kind of wealth. The roach was still there, crawling across the ceiling of room 7 at the Starlight Motel, but Clara was not there to watch it anymore. Room 7 was empty now, waiting for the next guest who needed to disappear, the next person running from choices they could not undo. Jerry the manager had not asked questions when she checked out, had simply nodded and wished her well. He understood that some people came and went like shadows, leaving no trace except the memory of cash payments and quiet conversations. The neon sign still buzzed and flickered, still cast pink shadows across empty rooms, still offered vacancy to anyone desperate enough to need what the Starlight Motel provided: anonymity, invisibility, a place to exist between who you were and who you might become. But Clara was no longer watching from the shadows, no longer pulling strings from the margins, no longer the invisible queen of anything. She was just Maria Santos now, nobody special, nobody dangerous, nobody worth remembering. And for the first time in 24 years, that felt like exactly who she was supposed to be,